And welcome. This is Reed Tattersall with BackNine, and I'm going to be walking you through BackNine's API documentation. BackNine's API docs are public, so you can hop on over to docs.back9ins.com and go through the same examples that I will be demonstrating. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to embed, quote, and apply. And in order to do so, all we need to do is copy some code from Boss and paste it into the HTML of your website. How do we do that? I'll show you. So I'm in Boss. I'm going to hit quote and apply. I need to click quote and apply websites. And I can look at my various websites and either grab this embed code here, or if I click on a specific one, I can hit generate embed code, copy it, and now I want to put quote and apply into this web page. So as we can see, there's no quote and apply here. Now if I go to the HTML of that page, and I'm going to place my embed code right there, I'm going to head on back and quote and apply appears. So as a part of this embed code, there's something called this data strife key. This is what identifies your account so that all the information that goes into this quote and apply, like the client's name and quote, will be available within your Boss account. So once you have quote and apply set up, you may want to do some more advanced things. So let's talk about those things. The first thing is pre-filling quote and apply. Why would we want to do that? Well, let's say we're bridging from an existing CRM, or you've already received some existing client information or quote information, and when the user loads into quote and apply, you don't want them to have to put in their name again, their birth date, their phone number, all that information that you may already have. So there's two ways to pre-fill. One is via URL params. So I'm looking at an example quote and apply website, and all I need to do is type in pre-fill and then start to pass in the client's information. So in this situation, I'm going to pass in first name equals John, and there's no John here. I'm going to load that page, and now John appears. So we can keep on going with this format and continue to pass in more information, and it will appear. In these API docs, there are a ton of examples. There's also a whole list of parameters under quote and apply parameters for everything that you can pre-fill. Now, if you don't like URL parameters, you don't want the user to see this, the alternative is to add those parameters into the source of that embed code. So we're going to say question mark prefill and last name equals Doe. Save that, and as I look at this, there's no Doe in the last name, and if I refresh, Doe is now there. One other important thing that I want to cover is pre-filling using a national producer number. Why? Well, let's go through that. Let's say you have hundreds of agents or an unknown number of agents, and you may not know their data strife key. You may not want to manage that. So instead of sending in a data strife key, which tells us who the agent is, what we can do is pass in the parameter NPN, which is short for national producer number. So I'll say national producer number equals 123, which isn't a national producer number in our system, and refresh, and the user's going to see a registration page if that NPN doesn't exist within Boss. It will allow them to register. If you pass in an NPN that does exist, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it's going to find that agent and load their quote and apply website. So instead of managing that client ID, you can just pass in NPN to handle dynamic agents. So, quote and apply will allow you to pre-fill client information in the browser. And that works for a number of users. If you want to do everything via API, then this part is for you. So get quotes allows you to do, as it says, get quotes. We have an example request, client ID, or pass in national producer number. In this situation, I want $1 million death benefit. Here's a little bit of information about the insured and some more quote information. I'm going to pay semi-annual, and I want a 15-year term in California. So I'm going to go through some Postman examples to show you how that works. So first up is the auth. You need to have an X BackNine authentication, which is the value of your API key. Where do you get your API key? Go to BOSS. You're going to go to your settings. You have developer settings, and you can generate an API key, or if you already have one, you'll be able to view it. This is a demo key. Don't try it because by the time you do, it won't work. So that's it for my headers. Head on over to the body. You could just copy the example, which is pretty much what I've done. I just included my specific client ID. And I got John Doe 15-year term. Let's send this request. There we go. So first up is banner, $1 million. I got the exam details, bunch of other information, conversion. Pretty much everything that you see that powers quote and apply should be returned here. You can quote a lot more than just term insurance. What's great about this is I can quote IULs, I can quote whole life, I can quote long-term care. So let's try to get an accumulation IUL quote, and we'll paste that in there. I just need to include my client ID, and let's get a quote. Now something like a min non-mec death benefit AIUL, accumulation IUL, I got a 10 pay here using $10,000 of premium. This request is probably going to take longer than term quotes, just a heads up. So that took 12 seconds or something. There we go. We got Prudential, we have their cash values. We're going to have more companies, their death benefit and cash values year by year. Pretty cool. So once we have quotes, we can now display those within your own user interface. So the user at this point doesn't need to see any front end page that BackNine has created. You can design your own user interface, use the API to get quotes, display those quotes. What you may want to do next though is actually create that e-app within BOSS or within quote and apply. So you can do a lot of things through the API, but you cannot go from start all the way to a finished application only using API. So at some point, the user, whether that's the agent or owner or insured, they'll need to get into quote and apply to do some of the final steps. So to create the e-app, I have an endpoint here, and it takes a really simple request body. We have step, which tells us what step do you want the user to load into when they load into quote and apply. The contact step, the name step, the quote step. And you need to include your quote ID. Where is that quote ID? Well, within every quote in the response, we're going to scroll down and we're going to find an ID. So let's say the user wanted this, the first one, which was Prudential, I think in this case. So again, I need my headers to include my API key. My body says, take it to the contact step when they load in. Underneath the insured, I'm going to paste that quote ID, send the request. There we go. So I received back an apply link, which you may want to store in your database. That's a page to get back into that e-app. and also the UUID. The UUID is the ID of that eApp that was created. And I'm going to need that for future updates. So I'm going to copy this now, head back to the docs, and there's examples and params and all that in here. So the next thing that you may want to do at some point is, well, we'll go in order here. So you can get new quotes for an eApp. So let's say you already have an eApp and you want to change some things on it, or you want to see what a 20-year term is as opposed to the 15-year term that was included. All we need to do is provide the changes. So in this case, I now want to change the, well, let's see, I'm going to change this selected type to term. Now I want a 30-year term and I want the death benefit to be $250,000. Let's send that. I think I screwed that up because we went from an IUL to a term. So we're going to skip that section. And we're going to move on to updating an eApps quote. So why would you update an eApps quote? Well, let's say in your user interface, the first thing that they saw was a whole set of quotes. So at that point, you may want to create the eApp via API. But then they decided that they wanted the second or third company in your list because it had a writer, better price, better logo, whatever the reason. So in order to do that, all we need to do is we need to update an eApps quote. So we have this endpoint /active quote. Oh, excuse me. The reason why the previous endpoint did not work was because I failed to set the UUID, which is the ID of the eApp. There we go. Okay, so that changes it to the banner term quote. So now if we want to change the active quote, and now let's say I want to change it to this new quote I just received, I'm going to take this quote ID and I'll provide it here, send. Oh, and again, I got an error because I didn't provide the UUID. So I have a UUID here when I created the eApp. And you're telling us, hey, for eApp, with this ID, change the active quote to this new banner quote. Let's send it. Errors null means a success. So this is going to allow the user to jump around, pick different products or different quotes on your web page, and keep BackNine's database in sync. The last thing here to demonstrate is updating some of the insured's information. So let's say you got a quote and the client used the name Jim, and then they went back and they wanted to update the name to James. So all you need to do is select the right endpoint, provide the updated changes, and in this situation, we're going to head on over to this endpoint. So again, I need to take the UUID of the eApp. I'm going to go to /insured, which is telling us you want to update the insured's information. And the body here, I'm going to send, I'll change his email, and we'll say first name is now James, and I received a success. That is just a little tour for you of BackNine's docs. We're available at support@back9ins.com. If you have questions, good luck building. We're excited to see what you're going to make. Thanks.